growing concern among present and former military leadership about the political independence of the nation's defense forces. Last night, President Donald Trump fired four-star General Charles Q. Brown Jr., a one-time fighter pilot who was only the second black officer to hold the title of Chairman of the Joint Chiefs of Staff. In total, 6 Pentagon officials have been fired, including the first woman to lead the Navy, the Vice Chief of the Air Force, and the top lawyers for the Army, Navy, and Air Force. The Trump administration insists the firings are due to the military leadership's focus on diversity, saying that it has lost sight of its role as a combat force.
No, you're just a
But
fucking
Rear
racist
Admiral
ass
Mike
president.
Smith, president of the National Security Leaders for America, says these changes are about politics. He joins me now. Welcome, Admiral.
Hi, Don. Thank you for having me.
Please expand on that, how these changes are about politics.
It's unprecedented for an incoming president to come in and purge the senior leadership of the military. You know, the one thing that has kept our military strong has been the fact that it is apolitical, that no matter who the president is, that your oath to the Constitution is you obey every lawful order, no matter what the policy is or what the party is. I know that's a lawful order, but it's being given by a president who only has 2 months left, and now they have to have a new calculus about whether or not they'll be fired by the next president by enacting the order of the current president. Recruiting, as you're bringing up, retention. I mean, I know. But because of how great an officer she was. So what signal are we sending to today's Lisas out there who are doing fantastic jobs commanding their ships? What are we telling them? We don't want you to serve in leadership positions because you're a woman? If this is all true, we have a huge problem, both with recruiting, but also with retention.
General Brown, as chairman of the Joint Chiefs of Staff, served in an advisory role. People will ask, shouldn't the president have the control to put advisors he trusts in those positions?
Presidents do have that authority. When the time comes for the chairman's tour to be over, then they can nominate an individual just like he did in his first term when he nominated General Milley to be the chairman. It was his choice to put that general in as the chairman. But no one has come in and fired a chairman like this. Senator Reid, who sits on the Senate Armed Service Committee, wrote an op-ed today suggesting that it was for perceived political disloyalty. No serving officer demonstrated political disloyalty, but they've been brought up in an organization where you follow civilian leadership. That's what they have been brought up to do. That's what their oath to the Constitution is all about.
We should note that the firings of these military leaders that we've been talking about, it comes amid other layoffs. It was announced on Friday that 5,400 civilian Pentagon employees will be fired starting next week. The ultimate plan is to reduce the Pentagon's workforce of more than 700,000 full-time civilian employees by up to 8%. Would you worry that the military could be underresourced?
Well, if you start to get to those levels, and the 5,000 next week are not at those levels, but if you get to that level, you have to see up the muscle of the organization. You know, the Pentagon, the strength is that we have continuity. There's political leadership changes every 4 to 8 years. The continuity provided by the civil servants who are there for years and years serving their country in critical positions, they need to be protected so that the lessons learned don't have to be repeated.
That was retired Rear Admiral Mike Smith, President of National Security Leaders for America. Thank you. Temperature check in the direction of the Republican Party. Since President Trump barreled onto the scene a decade ago, that direction has increasingly begun. 70% of Americans believe that what we are doing is right and we are keeping our promise from the Fowler has been covering this year's CPAC. Joins me in the studio now. And I see, hey Don. I remember one of the first CPACs I covered. It was back during the George W. Bush administration. Like anything else in politics, I mean, there were multiple cardboard cutouts of Trump and the MyPillow founder Mike Lindell that people were lining up to take selfies with. There was merchandise simultaneously calling the January 6, 2021 insurrection a Fedsurrection, implying that it was a setup, and also celebrating people as political prisoners. And it felt like every third person that was attending was somebody who was either present at, supportive of, or pardoned for their actions on January 6th. Even though this wasn't a Trump campaign event, the closest parallel I can think of is an all-day Trump rally with its energy and mishmash of speakers, but just spread. Did receive that golden chainsaw from the president of Argentina before declaring, quote, "I am become meme," to great applause. All the way down. There were panels about January 6th. Several cabinet secretaries were there sharing how their agency or department plans to implement this agenda, and a lot of nods to that DOGE effort and a notion pushed by Musk that they'll save so much money they can return some of it to taxpayers.
It's money that's taken away from things that are destructive to the country, and from organizations that hate you.
So DOGE checks, I guess. We'll keep an eye out for those. But there is a long list of things Trump has done in his first 30 days back in the White House. How did those play with this crowd?
So many of the speakers and attendees I spoke with say Trump has already won. He's already done everything he's promised on the campaign trail, like ending wokeness or his push for mass deportations.
The illegal alien criminals are being sent home. We're draining the swamp and we're restoring government by the people, for the people.
I mean, CPAC Don is basically the opening turn on the Trump 2.0 victory lap. Unlike his first 30 days, there wasn't a whole lot of news making going on, but it was like a callback to his greatest hits on the trail.
And what does the CPAC of today say about where the zeitgeist is?
Well, over the last decade of Trump, the tent of conservatism has taken on some interesting shapes. It's a little bit smaller, but also deeper and definitely Trump-shaped.
That's it. Fowler, fresh from this year's CPAC conference just outside Washington. Thanks.
Thank you.
NPR News.
When you look at your body in the mirror, do you love what you see? Maybe you've heard of body positivity, but what if we just felt neutral about our bodies?
If you can love your body unconditionally and just feel amazing about it all the time, that's awesome. But most people can't. Setting that as like the gold standard just makes a lot of people feel like they're failing.
New ways of thinking about our bodies. Next time, on To the Best of Our Knowledge.
Sunday morning at 10 here on South Carolina Public Radio. By the mid-2000s, the alleged link between vaccines and autism had been repeatedly disproven. There is no evidence that the two are related.
But the myth was out there, and its power was growing.
Once you've rung a bell like that, it's very hard to unring it.
That's on the next Through Line from NPR. Sunday afternoon at 1 on South Carolina Public Radio.
I'm Winter Johnston with these headlines. Pope Francis remains hospitalized in critical condition. The Vatican says the 88-year-old pontiff experienced an asthma-like crisis today, which required high flows of oxygen. Russian state media say preparations have started for a face-to-face meeting between President Trump and Russian President Vladimir Putin. Officials say the potential talks could involve broad discussions on a number of topics, including the war in Ukraine. Hamas freed 6 Israeli hostages as part of another exchange with Israel today. Israel has agreed to release more than 600 Palestinian prisoners and detainees as part of this latest swap. I'm Windsor Johnston, NPR News in Washington. Support for NPR comes from the station and from the Wallace Foundation, working to develop and share practices that can improve learning and enrichment for young people and the vitality of the arts for everyone. Ideas and information at wallacefoundation.org. And from Subaru, who, along with its retailers, is partnering with Operation Warm to provide more than 130,000 children in need with brand new necessities like coats, shoes, and socks. Subaru, more than a car company. This is NPR.
This is All Things Considered. I'm Don Gagnier. Lately, host Scott Detrow has been having conversations on the ways movies can inspire us, surprise us, even disappoint us. I'll let Scott take it from there.
Now it's time for our weekly segment where some of NPR's film experts and self-proclaimed film experts get together to discuss what's been on their minds. Today, we've got All Things Considered producer Mark Rivers. Hey, Mark.
Hey, Scott.
And NPR Pop Culture Happy Hour host Aisha Harris. Hey, Aisha.
Hey, Scott.
Mark, what are we thinking about today?
I want to talk about what I think are some of the bankable young actors today. Let's say under 40. I'm thinking Timothy Chalamet, Glenn Powell, Zendaya, Austin Butler, Mark Robbie, Florence Pugh, Tom Holland, maybe Michael B. Jordan. Yeah, Aisha, do you agree with this list? Did I leave anybody important out?
I mean, I don't know if I believe that there are any bankable actors anymore.
Let's try to get on the phone.
Well, I mean, I think there are bankable franchises, but I think it's hard to be able to tell if a lot of these stars are the ones who are driving people to go see those movies, or if it's the sort of the franchises they're leading, whether it's Twisters or, you know, Dune. But I understand. Keep going.
I think
Talk a little bit more.
I think you're right. I think IP takes primacy, but if we're talking who is being put in these IP projects, actually 2 years in a row. And this hashtag was started by this woman, April Rain, black woman, who was not a Hollywood insider. She's like a campaign finance lawyer, but she was big on what was Black Twitter. And she posted this hashtag, and it really blew up. In the second year that the Oscars shut out any non-white nominees, there were boycotts. She had Vivian Smith boycotted, Spike Lee boycotted. And the Academy said they wanted to double its numbers as far as women. They wanted to double people of color. Back in 2014, there was a study that LA Times did that found that around 95 to 96% of the membership was white.
For The Color Purple, the musical version of that.
Now there's something about that all you ladies should know.
She was going around talking about how, yes, she's a veteran actress. She is able to star in certain movies. She's been nominated for an Oscar before, but she still struggles to prosper in the same way that some of her peers have financially.
And I want to say, after those Oscar years, and I think there was this actually kind of a pretty big explosion of black art that came out in, like, say, 2016. You had Moonlight, which won Best Picture, infamously won Best Picture the year at the next year's ceremony. And you had other kind of benchmarks. You had Black Panther in 2018, which showed that IP franchises can be led by an all-black cast and make money not just here and overseas.
You get to decide what kind of king you are going to be.
You had a movie like Girls Trip, which showed that black women could be raunchy and fun and quirky and also, bring in dollars.
Okay, now here's what I want. Let me get 3 shots of whiskey with a Coke to chase. Coke Zero, though. Watching my figure.
Tina, this is only an hour flight.
Oh, well then in that case, let me go ahead and get those 3 shots now, and then bring me a shot of Bailey's once we get into cruising altitude.
And a lot of these movies, it provided these rich roles for folk like Dan Kaluuya, Tiffany Haddish, T.J. Rice, and some.
As for what the opposition wants to say,
they would have kind of these rich careers going forward. But I'm looking at the landscape, and a lot of those guys have not had the kind of similar successes that their contemporary white peers have had to me.
So of the black actors today, who do you think has had a career most comparable to their white peers?
I mean, obviously someone like I mentioned up front, like Zendaya. I think she's gotten into the big tentpole projects like Dune. She's been in kind of smaller, more adult dramas like Challenges from last year.
How often does this happen? Going after the same girl?
Not as often as you think. We usually have different types.
So you're saying I should be flattered?
Aren't you everybody's type?
I also think about someone like Zoe Saldana. She's been in the industry for a long time. She's kind of been like, the girl in both movies with an all-black cast, movies with an all-white cast. And she's been in these gigantic successes like Avatar and Guardians of the Galaxy and Avengers movies. I think the problem with Zoe is that she's had to be kind of blue and green for the last blue or green for the last 10 years or so. And I'm grateful for someone like Amelia Perez that has allowed her to actually act in her own skin color. But I think as far as
a non-alien,
as a non-alien, as an actual human.
I mean, here's the thing. I've already said this before, but I think the concept of a actor was 20, 30 years ago. Mm-hmm. So Tom Cruise, Will Smith, those types of things, those are not the benchmarks.
Yeah.
Yeah, they're not the benchmarks anymore. I can imagine someone like Keke Palmer having a career that is similar to someone like Jennifer Lawrence. She has range. She's also just very affable and very personable.
Keke Palmer is someone I want to see have like a screwball comedy kind of career. You know, like I want to see her in stuff like His Girl Friday. I want to see her. I think Keke Palmer to me is almost more. She's more of a social media star than a movie star. I think they're kind of squandering her talents on social media.
Yeah, I mean, actually, even when I think about it, she is a child actress. She is a Disney. So, I mean, you could even say that Keke Palmer's trajectory should be similar to someone like Ariana Grande. But we are not seeing that because she, like Ariana, can sing, dance, she can do all the things. And that is something that, like, I hope that someday we are able to value her in that way.
So this is a broader problem then of what projects are being greenlit, and also, Mark, as you said, where those projects are going.
Yeah, you know, kind of what you just said, like the way movies are being made now is different. But that trickles down to where, so if the white actors are suffering because of that, if you can't sell a Margot Robbie movie, you have to sell it as a Barbie movie, then the black actors I feel suffer even more. And I think there's still kind of a lack of imagination from studio heads about what they want to see black actors be in. You know, I think they make calculations. Put two black leads in the same movie, all of a sudden it's a black movie. All of a sudden it's not going to travel overseas. And I think it's a lack of imagination. I think there's still a biopic might be safe, you know, our movie about trauma or slavery might be a little bit safer. But I think there's kind of other more fun and kind of stylistically or tonally diverse roles. I think black actors still struggle to get those types of roles.
Yeah, I think the other thing is that, like, if the studios are not going to promote the films, and of course this is an industry-wide problem, like even George Clooney movies that drop on Apple Plus are not, like, you know, getting a lot of play. But I think if it's an industry-wide problem, it falls on people like myself, film critics, to sort of champion the movies that are getting made, because they are getting made. I think it's just, they're harder to find. And so I think of a movie like Rye Lane, which came out a couple of years ago, directed by Rain Allen Miller.
We've been together, but we had a house together.
This is serious commitment. I wish more people had seen it. It was on Hulu at one point. I don't know if it's still there, but it's really important for people to just, like, seek them out, because they do exist. There is a problem. There is a problem with the industry and making those movies, but they are getting made. It's just harder to find.
All right, we'll do this again next week. That was NPR's Mark Rivers and Aisha Harris. Thanks to both of you.
Thanks, Scott.
Thank you.
Talks about the future of Gaza continue in the Middle East after President Trump suggested earlier this month a U.S. takeover of the Israeli-occupied Palestinian territory. Candidate Trump picked up significant support among Arab and Muslim voters in the key swing state of Michigan in last year's election. NPR's Sarah McCammon recently traveled to Dearborn and Southeast Michigan and joins me now. Hi, Sarah.
Voted for the devil.
So you spent time in and around Dearborn. It's one of the nation's most heavily Muslim and Arab communities. Just days after President Trump, again, repeatedly talked about the U.S. taking over the Gaza Strip and resettling Palestinians in neighboring countries. I'm based in that part of the world, and I had some of those conversations in that area as well. Mine were within hours of Trump's comments. I found people very reluctant to talk. What did you hear from those that you met?
Yeah, you know, Don, I also ran into some of that reticence to talk. I spent some time at the largest mosque in the country there in Dearborn, and several people didn't want to talk about politics. But from those I did speak with, I heard a range of reactions, including disappointment and concern, and also a lot of skepticism about Trump's proposal. I visited a coffee shop in Dearborn Heights, which, as you know, is a heavily Arab and Muslim area where Trump outperformed Vice President Kamala Harris in November by several points. And there I met Mujtaba Hadi. He's a recent college graduate and an engineer. And I asked him about Trump's plan to relocate Palestinians.
He talks about it from like a positive point of view, how he wants to build community for them and get them out of the region. But to be honest, looking at it from my point of view, he doesn't care about the Palestinians. You know, he cares about the real estate that they're on. And I feel like that's his priority more than anything else.
And you know, Hadi told me he didn't vote in the November election because he wasn't pleased with what he was hearing from Trump or the Democrats. His friend Abbas Al-Wisha is also an engineer. He voted third party in the election, but for similar reasons, similar concerns. And he's also worried about Trump's plans for Gaza.
If people want to move, it's on their own. But you can't forcibly do this. We've seen it historically. It's not good. America's looked at the leader in the world, but when you're doing these things or when you're saying these things, you want to forcibly move a population, that's not right.
And, you know, we should note, Don, that the Trump administration has offered mixed messages about that. The White House said that any move of Palestinians would be temporary, but Trump has talked about permanent relocation.
So we mentioned that there was a notable shift in the vote toward Trump among many Arab and Muslim Americans, a group that had historically leaned toward Democrats. 4 years early, Joe Biden carried this area by a wide margin.
Right.
What did you hear from Trump's support about how they're feeling now? And again, including from some community leaders.
Noticed, Don, and this is a phenomenon I think we Trump supporters. Sometimes they don't take everything he says completely
The abstaining from voting was rooted in just this strong anger, even hatred for Biden administration policies, specifically support of Israel.
I would agree with that. I heard again and again frustration with the status quo and a sense that many of these, especially community leaders, were hopeful that by supporting Trump, they would see some change. They talked about his promise to be a peacemaker in the region and in the world, and their hope was that he would somehow bring a change to the status quo in the war.
All right, thank you, Sarah. Sarah McCammon is a political correspondent at NPR.
Big stuff.
Listening to All Things Considered from NPR News. Germans head to the polls on Sunday in a national election that will likely mean a change of power at the top of the government. The frontrunner to become the country's next chancellor is a conservative politician with a business background, and he wants to restore Germany's status as a European powerhouse, both economically and militarily. NPR's Berlin correspondent Rob Schmitz reports.
One of the first German politicians to respond to the Trump administration's Norbert Röttgen has known Merz for more than 30 years. The two politicians for the center-right Christian Democratic Union Party entered parliament together. Röttgen says most German politicians specialize in compromise and the art of making policy.
Whereas his fundamental access to politics is the realm to realize what I believe in.
Röttgen says the 69-year-old Merz, who hails from a conservative family line of lawyers and who spent a stint as a management consultant, believes, above all, in decency.
Societally conservative, traditional values, then a strong free market conviction, and then he is a fundamental pro-European and transatlanticist.
And that will be crucial as Germany navigates an increasingly thorny relationship with the Trump administration bent on ending Russia's war in Ukraine as quickly as possible, so far without inviting Europe or Ukraine to the table.
I think the Europeans have not really found a collective way forward. You have all sorts of ideas that are contradicting each other.
Jana Pugliarin, director of the Berlin office at the European Council on Foreign Relations, says the outgoing administration of Chancellor Olaf Scholz has not helped build a cohesive way forward for Europe on Ukraine.
I think Friedrich Merz, by disposition, would be more open to also support Ukraine more decisively, but he has to work in a framework. He will be constrained by his coalition partner and also by the German population.
Because Merz's party is polling at 30%, he will be leading talks with one or two other parties to form a coalition government. It could be German politics, agreed to work with a party seen by mainstream political parties as a threat to Germany's democracy.
Es ist meine Hoffnung, dass es nicht passiert.
On the streets of Berlin, voter Ute Wolter says she hopes Merz does not break a promise he made to refuse to govern with the AfD, which is polling in second place behind Merz's party. Wolter says she thinks Merz is flirting with populism, and she says populism is the last thing Germany needs right now. Rob Schmitz, NPR News, Berlin.
This is NPR News.
Nobody has to know your mind.
This week on Mountain Stage, we welcome home West Virginia native John R. Miller. We'll also hear the bluegrassy side of Baltimore's Chris Jacobs, Nashville's Lindsay Liu, plus Jeffrey Martin and Margot Silver.
Hi, this is John R. Miller. Join us this week in live performance on Mountain Stage.
This evening at 6 on South Carolina Public Radio.
In the past, singer-songwriter Yola was pressured by producers to sound a certain way.
The number of times I've wanted to say to somebody, if you want to do this thing, why don't you sign yourself and you do it? But no, they need my body to do it.
Yola stands for herself on her new EP, My Way, and performs in studio on the Next World Cafe.
This evening at 8 here on South Carolina Public Radio.
I'm Windsor Johnston with these headlines. The Vatican says Pope Francis remains in critical condition after suffering an asthma-like crisis that required high flows of oxygen. The 88-year-old pontiff was hospitalized more than a week ago for a lung infection. President Trump addressed the annual gathering of the Conservative Political Action Conference outside of Washington today. The speech comes a little more than a month into his second term in office. The Trump administration says it will not support a UN resolution that urges Russia to withdraw its troops from Ukraine. The UN General Assembly is set to consider the issue on Monday, the third anniversary of the Russian invasion. I'm Windsor Johnston, NPR News in Washington.
Support for NPR comes from this station and from Indeed, designed to be an end-to-end hiring solution for businesses of all sizes to attract, interview, and hire candidates, all from one platform. Learn more at Indeed.com/NPR. From the Kauffman Foundation, providing access to opportunities that help people achieve financial stability, upward mobility, and economic prosperity, regardless of race, gender, or geography. Kauffman.org. And from the sustaining members of this NPR station.
I'm trying.
This is All Things Considered from NPR News. I'm Don Gagnier. Natalie Morales usually plays characters that are full of life. From
That's
parks
strange.
and
So I was
recreation
able
to
to
no
see
hard feelings, she's
not
often
logged
the
in.
fun, irreverent friend
Yeah, I
who
guess that
injects a
makes
bit
sense.
of energy to the plot. Now she's
But
bringing
this
that
lag
vibe to a
sucks.
very different
And it
role,
sucks
the
very
title
bad.
character in the new movie, My Dead Friend Zoe. The film is about a veteran who keeps being visited by the spirit of her friend from the Army.
It is about, these people happen to be veterans, but I think it's sort of universal because I think a lot of people have survivor's guilt.
Natalie Morales spoke to my colleague Rachel Martin on NPR's Wild Card. That's the Pick a Card podcast, where life and death are often topics of conversation.
I'm back out of it. Back out of it.
Okay, first 3 cards, 1, 2, or 3. Let's go with 2. 2. What activity gave you a sense of freedom as a kid? I used to climb a lot of trees, which did give me a sense of freedom. And I grew up with a mango tree in my backyard that is like a very Miami thing to say and a very Latin girl thing to say. I didn't have a lemonade stand. I had a mango stand, and I sold mangoes. Did you? Yeah, I did. Like, I had a for whole how much? mango. I can't remember, but I do remember that other kids in my neighborhood were also selling mangoes, and that was not cool. So I combined and I made a mango monopoly, and I was quite successful at it. But yeah, I climbed a lot of trees, and I would also, we had this little like shed in the back, and I would climb up there and just look at the highway behind my house and the sky and stuff, and that definitely made me feel, it made me feel freer. I think I felt a little bit confined where I grew up. I don't know. My mom was very protective of me, so I think that made me feel like I had some sort of freedom just to be able to look out at the world.
Yeah, I think we all need that, like that sense of perspective and just reminding yourself, especially when you're young. Like, it's not all here. The world is a big place, and it's bigger than the 4 walls that you're being raised in, and you get to dream a little bit when you have some perspective out a window.
It's like the coding has changed now.
Okay. 1, 2, or 3?
I'll do 2.
2. Does the idea of an infinite universe excite or scare you?
Both. It's scary and exciting. It's scary to feel small, and it's also liberating to feel small.
There are some people who think that the idea of forever is just is fundamentally unmooring.
I understand that. Yeah, I think there are so many things in life that are not explainable that you have to start to, if you want to keep going,